Welcome to the Bobby O Show. My name is Bob Opotzner, and I have a show lined up today for us that I think is very pertinent to the issues that our society and our country are facing today. There are many norms that we have taken for granted throughout my life and most of our lives about freedom, about democracy, about the rule of law, and about the right to have free expression, to say what we think, and to not have our governmental leaders tell us what we can or cannot do. If you're following the Harvard University, I'm a Yale grad, Harvard University is going on right now. You've got to support the concept of whether you like a conservative or liberal perspective. You got to respect the fact that there should be freedom in our society. Many people are sitting back and just complaining. And yet it should be called kvetching. But I have two ladies on my show today who are working hard. They're expressing their rights to express themselves, to tell their messages, and to explain to others the importance of explaining and the right to preserve our democracy, to make sure that we don't have a dictatorship, which our country is leaning more and more to every single day. And the guests I have today are Celeste Cobb from an organization that she's created called REBS, R-E-B-S, and Vicki Volper, who is part of an organization that's informal called Resistors. And before we go to my two guests, I just want to read to us and to the audience the First Amendment, because you hear it so often spoken in our society, and people don't really quote it correctly. And I think it's important for our show to understand the freedoms and rights we have as American citizens. The First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, and this is very important also, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Ladies, Celeste and Vicki, welcome to the show, and I want to hear more about, as we ask some questions, about your organization that you formed and what you guys are doing to support the rule of law. Hi, ladies.
Hi, Bob.
Hello there.
Thanks for inviting us. Nice to be here.
It's my pleasure. Vicki, why don't you we'll start with Vicki first. Just tell us a little bit about the organization that you're working with and what the goals and objectives are. And then right after that, I'm going to show us a picture on the screen that my director, Candy Ann, has. Go ahead, Vicki.
Sure. My group is called Resistors. I organized this group in January of 2017, after the very beginning of Trump 1, when so many of us were feeling despair. And there is a Joan Baez quote that action is the antidote to despair. So I decided to form a group of people who would take actions to fight back against the rights that are being taken away from us and the frightening situation that we are in. And our group has grown. We have over 1,000 people on our mailing list, and we meet every Monday morning on a Zoom call. We meet in person first Sunday of the month, and take actions in person. And it's a wonderful community that is doing very good work. And having this community makes everybody feel better, as well as actually doing practical actions that fight back.
And I can tell my own personal observation that Vicki has been very active in campaigns, et cetera. She lives down in Fairfield County, Westport area, I believe it is. And I went to a Danbury rally. I live in Richfield. And who do I see with Vicki Volper? Right there, talking about Democratic issues before the election. I know Vicki also went to Pennsylvania, and I think Wisconsin also, at least, right?
I did. I knocked doors for Susan Crawford in Wisconsin as well. We get around.
I sent her checks. I think that was a Supreme Court nominee from Wisconsin. Celeste, how about you? Tell me about what you're doing and your organization, REBS.
Sure. Thanks, Bob. I'm probably fairly typical, I suspect, where for most of my life, politics was something that happened outside of me. I assumed even when leadership wasn't necessarily somebody that I supported or was excited to have in office, I believed that it would all work out in the long run, that I didn't really need to get involved. But with the elections that happened at the end of last year, that all changed for me. I was afraid of Trump 2. I was very concerned about the preservation of our democracy. and I needed to do something. And so I did form this organization called REBS, stands for Reading, Easton, Bethel, and surrounding towns. And it is a community resistance opposition organization. And we are growing all the time. And like Vicki, and Vicki's a good friend and a fellow sister organization, we are focused on providing actions to people to help them feel like they are doing something to stop the momentum of this regime, really, that we have in Washington, D.C.
Would you essentially say that what you just said, Celeste, is the mission of REBS?
The mission is, we have a mission statement, and actually if folks go to our website, which is rebsct.com, you will see our mission statement and all of our tactics that we focus on in support of that. But it's around communication and education. It's around actually getting out there and letting our voices be heard. And it's also about monitoring our representatives, our state representatives, those that go to Washington, D.C., as well as those in Hartford, to ensure that they are doing what we, at least as a group, feel is appropriate relative to preserving our democracy.
Vicki, what she just said, what Celeste just said about education, it comes across every single day. Yesterday, I heard there was a town meeting for a congressman, a Republican town meeting, and somebody from the audience said, the Republican was saying, let's vote for, let's support, and this is why I'm supporting the big, beautiful bill, which I call the big, ugly bill, which is going to put us so far in debt, it's unbelievable. And someone said, well, did you know about the provision that you could not, if this bill passes, you could not hold an elected official in contempt of court via court order? And the congressman said, I don't know that. Where was that? And that congressman said, I forget the guy's name, he's not in our area. And he said, well, gee, I didn't see that, but it's a 1,000-page bill. You don't expect me to read the whole bill. And that's where education and knowledge, and that's where groups like yours are important nationwide. Because when I was on the Board of Education for 15 years, every meeting we had an agenda, and we really studied the agenda because we knew that there were people who would come. We had about 15, 20 PTA people essentially who would come to every meeting, and they had us on our toes. And that was a good thing because we were more prepared. Whereas right now, and I'd like you guys to comment about this, right now, we don't have 3 co-equal branches of government anymore. We have at best 1 3/4. And that's a problem we have. But Candy Ann, would you please show the short video we have, and we're going to have the ladies tell us what the purpose is and what it says. If you can't read the sign, I think it said only the law is king. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, which of you ladies are both? Who was there that day? Okay, Celeste, where was that video taken?
So that is on one of the Merritt Parkway bridges in Fairfield. So we are there every week with a new sign, and we figure we get in front of about 5,400 cars that go below us during that time. We're there for about an hour and a half each time, and we are on the morning rush. We're facing the southbound traffic, and I absolutely love that message. It is very true in my opinion.
When you both talk to your friends or people you meet, and I'm sure if you're handing out literature at the recycling plant or wherever you may go, when I ran for election, it's always the first place I went was a recycling plant on a Saturday. You find tons of people, and I hand out my literature. When you meet people you don't know or friends, and you try to get them involved or to at least understand what's going on, I'll go with Vicki first. How do you go about doing that? How do you go about getting people to understand the issues and get more involved in protecting our democracy?
So first of all, we have a visibility brigade also. We have the same thing we do on Wednesday evenings. We have a late afternoon rush hour. And our message this week was White House for sale, ? No, ! And every week we come up with a different relevant message. And we do a lot of research about what we think will resonate with people who drive by and see the messages. How do people learn about us? Well, I have a resistors button that I wear, and sometimes I'll be in the supermarket and someone will ask me, what is that button? And I will explain what the resistors do, what our mission statement is, which is about education and activation. We have a website as well, resistorsct.org. And in our weekly Monday morning Zoom calls, we educate the resistors about what is the issue of the moment and what can we do about it. And we stress that every action is important, even though it may seem small. Every postcard written, every phone call made, every door knocked does matter. I think, Bob, I may have told you about the Mark Elias story about the guy with the potatoes punching holes in them. Did I tell you about that, Bob?
Yeah,
Mark Elias spoke about.
Who's Mark Elias? I know who he is, but who's Mark Elias?
Okay. Mark Elias is a premier lawyer who is fighting all of the Trump irregularities, filing lawsuit after lawsuit and winning and winning and winning. He's a brilliant attorney, and he's been doing this, fighting for our civil rights and defending the rule of law for many, many years. And he tells a story about Jewish prisoners during World War II. And their job was to pick potatoes in the field to feed the German army. And what he and one of his colleagues did is took a piece of wire and poked holes in the potatoes with the hope that that would ruin the potato and that the German army would starve. And if you think about it, it's such a small act, and the likelihood of it actually having an effect is small. But the fact is, he felt good about doing something. And I hear stories about ladies in nursing homes who are in their 90s and they can't write postcards and they can't go out on the street, but they organize within the nursing home and do whatever actions they can do. Because once again, action is the antidote to despair.
Celeste, tell me a little bit about, Vicki just mentioned that they have an issue of the moment or issue of the day.
Yes.
If there's an issue or two that you are most focused on, first tell me the issue or two and let's hear some discussion about the issues. If you could do so, if you were King Solomon, what would the issues or two issues that you would really like to have honed in on by us as Americans right now?
You know, that's almost a loaded question, Bob, because every week it's something new to be horrified about. But to your point earlier, that section of the bill that, yes, would not allow federal judges to hold the executive branch in contempt of court is huge. And so to your point, that was a really big hot button for me this week. And I sent out a message to all of our members. I just emailed them saying, this is what's going on. There's 4 states that seem to be waffling on supporting this bill in the Senate. Please, if you have friends or family in those states, reach out to them and let them know what's going on and tell their senators to vote no on this bill. And, you know, I did the same. Maine is one of those states. I'm actually from Maine originally. I reached out to my friends and family in the state of Maine. So it does ebb and flow. And there are so many horrible things in this bill to choose from. But this one is the most frightening to me because it would essentially, to your point, the 3/4 of the 3 branches that's still holding on is our court system, and this would do irreparable damage to the court system.
Yeah, you mentioned the state of Maine. Susan Collins, to me, is one of the biggest disappointments. She's a senator.
Yes.
Maine. You had Margaret Chase Smith.
I know.
Margaret Chase Smith was
Bob.
from Maine. She was the person who, in the McCarthy hearing, said, "Sir, have you no shame?"
Yes. Yes.
And when I watched McManus, whatever her name is, the lady who was part of the wrestling, McMahon. And when she didn't know what an IEP is, of education person. When Noam, the senator, former senator or whatever position was, governor, I think she was governor of South Dakota, when she didn't know issues that were simple issues that she was asked about.
Habeas corpus. She didn't know what habeas corpus meant.
That's what it was. Habeas corpus. She didn't know what habeas. She thought it was just the exact opposite of what it means.
Well, this is part of an autocratic plan, right? Is that the autocrat puts people in positions that are unqualified for their roles, right? That's all part of the plan. The thing that I've come to understand, I believe is true, is that this is all very calculated. So it's not like these really come as a surprise. Some of these steps that the government is making, or that Trump in particular is making, he has a plan, or somebody has a plan that's behind him.
Part of the problem is that in the election, the 2025 project, there was
Yes.
denial that he knew what it was about, and they're actually following that. But I will tell you, I am shocked at where we are in the first 5 months of his presidency. I knew it would be bad if he won. It is so much. I never dreamed that there would be attack. And I'll give you an example. Cancer. There's cancer research being done by Harvard. Harvard doesn't do the research for Harvard itself. I'm sure it's part of the great institution, but look at what we've benefited. We all know people who have had cancer, and but for great research done, or we had no people who died from COVID. And the idea that we're not going to be able to have COVID vaccines, perhaps if you're under 65 and healthy, the things that are going on are just frightening. One question I have for either of you to jump into, and that's this. Some people say that the Democrats make a mistake by raising a whole bunch of issues, and that they'd be better off picking 1 or 2 or 3 issues to hone in on. I have my thoughts on that. Let's go to Celeste first. What do you think? Should the Democrats be attacking, or I should say Democrats and the rhinos, the Republicans in name only, which is what Trump nastily calls Republicans who don't support him? What do you think? Should the Democratic Party and the opposition focus on a couple of big issues, or should we hit them all every week? What do you think, Celeste? I'll ask you next, Vicki, after that.
You know, it's a good question, Bob. And what I would say is I feel that, and I've said this to our representatives directly in town halls, I feel that they should every week be communicating to their constituents what's going down, what's the big issue this week, what's happening, what am I doing about it, right? As your representative, here's what I'm doing, and then here's what I need you to do. So I'm all for, because things are changing so quickly, so rapidly, when I look to our Democratic leaders, I would really like to see them crystallizing the issue, indicating what they're doing, as I said, and then letting us know how we can support them or advance the cause that we're all fighting for.
Vicki?
I agree with everything that Celeste said, but I would also say that if Kamala Harris were a white man, we would not be in this position. So, I mean, let's be real here. 30% of the country didn't vote. And I don't think there's much value for someone like me to try to figure out why we lost in the last election. I mean, that's above my pay grade, and I think we have to deal with where we are now. One thing I do know is the way to turn back tyranny is with peaceful protest. And Erica Chenoweth, who is a historian who studies tyranny, has found out that throughout the world, when 3.5% of the population engages in peaceful protest, that is enough to turn back tyranny, which is why we're working so hard to get people to take actions. And in particular, on June 14th, there is no King's Day. That happens to be Trump's birthday. It happens to be the 250th anniversary of the military in the United States. And so he is throwing $100 million of taxpayer money birthday party for himself, where there will be tanks in Washington, D.C. And so we are asking every person of good conscience to be out on the streets on June 14th. You can go to nokings.org and find a location near you. You just put in your zip code. For an hour or an hour and a half, everybody should be out that day. It should be millions of people to show that we do not have kings in this country and we want to take our country back. And it's going to be hard to reverse all the damage that's done. And what you're saying about canceling cancer research, even if they reinstate it, to put the people back in those positions and get the research going again. Kennedy canceled the mRNA vaccine for bird flu. People are very soon going to start dying of bird flu. It's going to be hard to reverse it, but at least let's stop the bleeding. At least let's stop going in the wrong direction and start going in the right direction.
You've said so many things I want to comment upon. First of all, I'm showing you a book I'm reading right now, Anthony Fauci's book. And there's a lot in his book about bird flu. And it's amazing to me, when I'm reading your book about 2/3 of the way through, how great a man this guy is, how much of a humanitarian he is. And when he talks about the bird flu epidemic that he was worried about, and President Bush, the son Bush, was a big advocate and supporter of Dr. Fauci. And in our society, if you're not following the president, you have 35 to 40% of this population who votes against you. I do want to comment one other thing. You said if Kamala had been a white man, she would have won. I'm going to go back further. If Hillary Clinton, when she ran in 2016, if James Comey in October of 2016 had not just said, FBI is investigating Hillary, which it was, but it was also investigating Trump, which he didn't say. Hillary would have won and we wouldn't be there. But the problem is, as Coach K from Duke basketball says, next page, we can't look back. We've got to go forward.
Right.
And I want to get you to
forward.
the issue that I think is critical is the 2026 election is very important. Obviously, we've got to get a Democrat, I would presume is what you want, a Democratic House representative so we can start having real investigations. And I'm not worried right now about having the vote be in favor as cast for the Democrats to win the House of Representatives in 2026. I'm worried about the counting of the vote. I'm worried about the shenanigans that will take place in certain states. And there's only about, in my opinion, 10 congressional seats that are really up in the air, unless Trump continues his Medicaid positions, et cetera. And we've got to get those votes. So how, ladies, do you think you're best in your organization? And one person makes a difference. And as you said before, Vicki, 7 million people, I think, was the number who voted for Biden, but did not even vote in this past election. And Kamala, who I adored, would have been the president. How do you get people to really get into the issue of voting if you think that's an important issue? Celeste?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's really important is, I'm sorry, did you ask?
No, go ahead.
I thought she was speaking. Either one.
Knocking on doors is the best way to get the message out. Personal conversations at the doors and learning how to listen. Learning about what interests people, what concerns them, and then explaining why your candidate will solve their problem or at least go in the right direction for what their problem is. And I mean, it's just communication in general as well. That's why these visibility brigades and all the postcards and all the phone calls that we make, it is about communication, but it's about listening. It's about hearing what people are concerned about and then focusing on that issue. Instead of talking to people, you really have to be a good listener in order to communicate with people.
How about you, Celeste?
Yeah, I think, obviously everything Vicki said is absolutely right. And, I look, what comes to my mind is anybody who followed that Wisconsin Supreme Court race, it was amazing. There was real active Democrat activity around educating the Wisconsin population with billboards, with postcards. We were involved in it, writing postcards to the folks in Wisconsin, trying to just raise people's general awareness around what it meant if they voted for one person versus another. I quite frankly would love to see the DNC doing more of that strategic education, even in these 4 states, for example, that I was talking about that are on the edge, that may vote no for the bill. Is, why don't we have billboards up in all of those states that are communicating the message and letting people know what's really going to happen if this bill passes and encouraging them to call their senator? I feel like we need a strategic effort, a big broad-based effort. And then to Vicki's point, we need tactical work, which is calling people, knocking on their doors, putting out flyers, like you said, at the recycling center. It needs to be a multi-pronged effort.
Yes, I have a question for you. Am I correct that you were in marketing professionally?
Yes.
Okay. I did check you out before the show. There's an old marketing expression, which is tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them what you told them. Isn't that pretty much a marketing?
Yeah. Yes.
I'd like to ask you, when I asked the question before about whether we should have the Democrats should be pushing a few major issues or all the issues, my philosophy is that we need to be having literally daily or weekly people designated for different issues. So I'd say, for example, Chris Murphy might be the person to speak, for example, on gun violence prevention and other issues. And you'd have literally, that's the person who would talk about the various issues, but pick the key ones. On the other hand, we can't forget the other issues. For example, to me, one of the biggest issues also, aside from voting, is we've got to understand that character does matter. If you ever see the movie, one of my favorites, The American President, great movie. If you haven't seen it, you got to see it. It's got Michael Douglas in it, and it's a phenomenal movie about a president. And the whole point was you got to be communicating with people and explaining to them that what the issues are and what am I going to do to try to solve your problem. It's easy to raise, oh my God, there's a debt ceiling problem. We're going to be right now $42 trillion in debt. Well, the Democrats got to say, well, here's what I'm going to do about it. And you sometimes have to say, you know what? We're going to have to tighten our belts. We have to understand that we're going to have to tax the rich and define the rich however you're going to do, however you're going to define it. But there's got to be, as far as I'm concerned, a certain minimal level of tax obligation. Pick 500,000 a year, $1 million a year, whatever number you want to pick. And no matter how many deductions you have, you got to pay a minimum. I mean, for President Trump to have paid, what, $750 1 year in taxes is bizarre. So my view is we've got to tell them what we're going to tell them, and tell them what you told them. Miss Marketing, what do you think, Miss Marketing?
I agree.
So
and you know, the way you tell them, I think I love the idea of the experts. I'm sorry, I didn't step on you, but the idea of having different experts, like a shadow cabinet, like they have in England. There's an expert in each field who will represent us. And I also would love to see a Mario Cuomo style televised little talk every day, like during COVID when Mario Cuomo spoke to us. Not Mario Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo spoke every day about the status of COVID and where we are and what we're doing. And it made people feel safe and educated. I like that idea very much, Bob. I think you're right about that.
And we have to be smart at who speaks for us. And for example, we have to understand it's middle America. And there's a lot of humanitarian issues that the three of us would want to talk about and support. The LGBTQ community, for example. That's a very important. Every person in our Constitution has rights. But Kamala Harris may have lost in Michigan because of an ad that was done about LGBTQ. And we've got to pick our issues. Not that we're going to forget issues. And quite frankly, I don't know if AOC and Bernie Sanders are our best spokespeople, although they are doing a great job. Folks, we only have a minute left. I'll have you guys back on in a few months again. But I really appreciate your involvement in protecting our democracy. You want us to go out there and stand in the Merritt Parkway and hold your signs and what you're going to do. And Vicki, for all your travels across the country for the last election. And the next time I see you, Vicki, I'm going to ask you, what do you think we should have done differently? Because you were in Pennsylvania, you were in Wisconsin, and those are states that we didn't do very well in. And we have to figure out what did we do wrong and what can we do better. But the answer isn't to say we can't put up a woman president in 2028. Because I've got a couple ladies, I like Whitmer from Michigan is one of my favorites. And also Josh Shapiro, but that's another time he's a guy. But I'm also worried because of the Jewish issue. So there's a lot of issues going on. Ladies, thank you so very much. It was really a pleasure. I'll see you soon. This has been Bob.
Thank you. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Bye now.